All right, next.
Thank you.
Sure. Really?
Do you need help?
Oh, no, I don't. Magic paints. All right, I use a lot of different kinds of paints. I move from one type of paint to another, and I'll be honest with you, these are my main go-to paints. I'm gradually moving toward Daniel Smith, and that's because McCracken has absolutely fabulous colors that he uses, and Daniel Smith is constantly coming up with new colors. There's, in fact, Lauren McCracken has a black, and I don't know how many of you have done the, okay, if I use ultramarine and this and mix it together, I can get a black. McCracken black to me is the way to go if you're doing a picture that needs really, really dark colors. I'm going to show you a picture that I did in one of his workshops. And this is a painting that almost all of this is neutral tint. And it's but the black in here is what almost makes some of this jump out. What I really like about McCracken black is you can lift it. You can take it off the paper. You can, once it's down, if I wanted to put a line through the center of this, I could. Now, it wouldn't be completely white, but you can lift McCracken black.
Just
And
water.
there are some blacks like
With
lamp
just
black.
water, you're not scraping it, just with water, you're
Just with water and a good, not a brush that lifts the top of the paper, but a brush just like that of Stoda Perla. Yes, McCracken black, I love it. All of these are his colors that he uses, and they're all Daniel Smith. So this is an example of the, and this is what he teaches, what he can get out of you. This is what he got out of me. This who knows how to say this? See, everybody has a different way. Thank you. I don't know, but I know that this particular blue, it's called Faience Blue, F-A-I-E-N-C-E blue, is as luscious and rich. It was the one that got me started into buying this particular line, and yes, it has a lot of rich pigments in it. That's wonderful. These, your bright colors, your reds and yellows and greens, but all of the colors, all that neutral tint was core. American Journey, I have fun little colors that I really, really like, but there's an artist, and I don't know how to say his last name, but it starts with a Y. He has his own brand of indigo, and what Cheap Joe does is he will talk to artists who are his friends, and he'll say, well, or they'll call him and say, you don't have an indigo that's good enough. Well, why don't you come and work with the people in my lab, and we'll see about coming up with a color. So that's where this came from, and that's where McCracken black came from. So keep an eye out at for the American Journey colors, because they really come out.
Okay.
They really come up with some good colors. What, I just point at you?
Yeah, you just say next slide.
My mother would be so upset. Now, the mission colors that I use mainly are Hooker's Green, Burnt Sienna, and Van Dyke Brown. And the reason I use those is because this is what I do with my real dark backgrounds. Is I'll take, this is my granddaughter, and she was doing her homework. I used a dark blue around, then I used the green, and then I use the brown. And it's heavy, heavy pigment, but it really makes that background kind of, I don't know, it's just wonderful, luscious and rich. I wish I had the picture here. But, yeah. Extras. All right, I've told you about this. Those were some ideas I thought that were really a cute idea. They're little, it's an old antique set of plastic luncheon plates. Found them in an antique store. And immediately I went, oh, little tiny palettes. And so this, you'll see the little sticky, all of these colors right here are the colors that I use for my portraits, for my skin. And that way I don't have to wonder, what color did I use for X? I've got it right there on that palette. So I just lift it up and that's what I use. Then I have a palette underneath that is shading in cool colors, and then a palette for shading in green colors. See, but that's the way I organize it. A lot of people can take one big giant palette and mix it all up. But I've only been painting for 6 years, well, 6.5 now. So I'm still learning, and I need to organize it so that I'm comfortable. And I'm just very comfortable with all of my little cups and all of these things, because they're, to me, the way I solve my problems. It's unusual, but there we are. Drawing pencil, a mechanical pencil. Mechanical pencil, you should have like a 2B mechanical pencil. That's just a suggestion. It's not a rush out and get one. But what I do, and what I'm going to show you in a minute, is when I draw a picture, the parts of the picture that are the whitest, I draw the darkest lines around. Okay? The parts that are super, super, super white, I draw the darkest around it. Then the outline of the entire shape is very dark as well. And once again, I'll show you why. Then details are lighter. If it's a portrait, you wanna, okay, we're still talking about stuff. I'll talk about the drawing in a minute. This is a light. I have it in my bag, but I don't have a table. So this is a wonderful light that is a travel light. See all the neat stuff you can buy? And it's a LED. You know, you don't have to worry about batteries. It's rechargeable. It's not that expensive. When it goes bad, and get another one. A little zipper bag. It's wonderful. And if you want to see it later, I got my bag right there. This is called Duralar. These are plastic sheets that you lay down over your painting, and you can paint on these plastic sheets, so you can try colors out. And I'm going to show you an example of where I used it in one of my paintings in just a minute. Now, I use a lot of Frisket. I do. I used to use more than I do now because I have learned the techniques that Lauren taught in the workshops. But I do use a lot of Frisket. This is it's a shield, a liquid shield that you put on your paper. It dries, and then you can paint, and of course it doesn't get under there because you have this shield on it. Then later on, you take it off, either with your fingertips or with a little flat rubber thing that you rub over the top, and it kind of collects it. It's kind of like rubber cement, but it's it's really a nice thing, and you get to buy more little things to, no, I don't
Is the first bit in case you wanna change something? Is that what that's all about?
No, it's to shield the whitest part of the paper.
So you leave it on? Or what,
Yes,
what do
you can leave it on for the entire, or you can do it like what I did with this painting, and I'm gonna show you in a little bit. I hope y'all get a good look at this painting. This painting, it took me a year to do. Now, it doesn't mean that it takes most people a year to do something, but I didn't know how to do landscapes. So I started doing research. And so it took me 6 months to be satisfied that I can put, that I can start working on the landscape. And the more I did it, the more fun it became. I mean, it was so much fun, and it had probably 2 bottles of this stuff on it. But it was a lot of fun doing. And to me at that time, when I was doing this, that was a huge painting. It was huge to me. And now, okay. These are 2 of the things that I learned to use in the McCracken workshops. And this is it's a plastic shield. It's shelf paper, but it is, the brand is, what is that? Duck brand. Does this say Duck on the right hand side?
Oh, yes, Duck Brand.
Duck brand. It's, and you literally peel off the back, put this down on your painting, and it shields it. You can take paint and sit it right smack in the middle of anything because this shields it. It's just plastic. And I'll show you how we deal with that in a little bit. But this is magic.
Bobbie,
Yes.
before you leave the first one, never use it on damp paper.
What is it?
Don't use it on damp paper.
Oh, no.
It's very important.
Yeah, don't use, don't, I would say don't do anything with
Dry.
damp paper, except paint on it. What is it? Oh, yeah, it will. Oh, yeah, it'll attach itself. It's the same as this. And everybody uses blue, I use blue artist tape for the longest time, forever and a day. And now I use architecture tape, it's called. Well, this one's called Art, excuse me, Art Alternatives. And it's a type of crepe tape that it's similar to artist tape, but remember I talked about the dark lines that I used when I was drawing my pictures? This is critical to my drawings because you can see through this, and you have to be able to see through to do some of the techniques that I do. So, yes. And I am going to move that a little bit. Now what? Okay, we've already talked about it. Oh. If you're an artist, you know what this is. This is the magic eraser. And you say, oh, we can't fix that on the paper. I'm gonna have to throw my painting away. No, you wet this, your paper's dry. Once again, that paper needs to be dry when you mess around with some of this stuff. Wet this, get it, wring it out really well, and then just go over it. I've erased entire trees that way. Sometimes you have to erase a little bit, let it dry. Erase a little bit, let it dry. But this is wonderful. So, yep. All right, I've shown you my tools. These are also little travel treasures. They're little feet. If you wanna know what kind they are, you'll have to come up and get it says upside. But these are little stackable feet. So when you're traveling, you can lay your painting against it and it elevates it a little bit. Good. You always need water, and I'll show you what I did with this very bottle. And you have another part of what I learned. And I always wondered what I was gonna do with this massive roll of tracing paper. And I now know what I am gonna do with it. I use it continuously. All right, let's use these materials now.
Bobbie,
Yes?
what kind of watercolor paper do you use?
Oh, thank you. When I was painting this one, this was in Arches. I had heard Arches was the only way to go. But when I was painting this one, there were places that did not accept the paint. Not many. But all you need to do is be painting on something and have that paper refuse to take the color. And I had not run into that. You know the picture of the little girl? I was talking with the juror. He was a Florida Watercolor Society juror, and he had accepted that painting. And I thought, I'm gonna pay this man to critique my paintings. And so he was, they got in touch with me. It was hysterical. Send your top 10 paintings. Be sure to list all awards that were given and where they were given. And I looked at that and I thought, oh boy, I'm in over my head. So I emailed the lady that was organizing all of this for him, and I said, I only have 4 paintings that I would want to have critiqued. And she said, well, just send them, it's fine. He went through them. It was supposed to be a 30-minute critique. He went through them. He said, this won't take long, because 4, it's not 10. And he went through some of the pictures, and he was talking about different parts of the pictures, and he came to this picture, the picture of my granddaughter. And he said, if you don't mind me asking, why did you put the plant in the picture? And we were zooming because it was, ill time. And he looked at me and I said, well. And then he kind of looked, he said, wait a minute, did you put that in the picture because it was in the photograph? And I said, yes. So he kind of nodded and he looked around like, how can I get out of here? But he said, where did you get your training? I said, I probably should have told you about that. I said, we have a senior center here in Tallahassee, and I started taking classes a few months ago. And he looked at me, he said, we need to start again. And about 45 minutes later, we finished the conversation. And one thing that he was interested in with me as a new artist, and I had wanted to start when I was 5 years old, right at the end he said, did your mother ever regret having told you to not be an artist when you grow up? And I said, I'm glad you asked that. I said, my mother was 68 years old when she started doing oil paintings. And she did them because she was doing it for someone in the church. She thought he needed money, so she set up art classes, and he was supposed to teach these art classes. She became an accomplished artist, and he got her a job illustrating for a magazine. She couldn't because she had rheumatoid arthritis. But she suddenly could say, she would call me and say, you need to take art classes. Yeah, that's not gonna work. I don't have the time. And I also found out on this journey that my dad could also paint. When he was in college, that was just one of the things that they did. He had a sport. It was boxing. Oh, but he was a good boxer. He had an art, so it was watercolors. You know, when he went to school, that was one of the requirements. So, all right, let's use these materials. One of the things that I learned that is really important is change whatever photograph you are using as your reference photograph to a black and white. And the way you do it is you take it into your iPad or your computer. You can do it on, it doesn't have to be in Photoshop. Please don't live in fear of that, because I don't use Photoshop. But it's an easy thing to use in an Apple product, on your phone or an iPad. I use an iPad all the time. Black and white, you can see what areas are the darkest. It makes all the difference in the world, because when you darken those areas, everything else comes off the paper. Here is the beginning of the picture, and you can see on the yellow parts, those are the frisket that I put. Now, I learned this technique in a workshop by David Smith, and he is a wonderful, wonderful teacher, okay? And one of the things that he did, he told us to put our frisket down and then cover the paper with water, lots and lots of water, until you can turn it up and it drips off. And then you just put lots of paint around, and then you move the, it was just, but it works. It works. That's how this came to be. Then I began to darken using the same color. This is my mid-tone color. And it also became my lightest color. Began to darken it. Here, I'm darkening some more. You can see the yellow coming through. And more, and once again, all of these very, very yellow places are all frisket. Now, most people wouldn't even think about using that much frisket. I mean, I didn't know. And I'm glad I didn't, because it turned out very well. This to me was an interesting part of the process. You can see, this is where I took the frisket off, and you can see the hard edges. And people, that's one of the reasons they don't use frisket, is because the edges are too hard once you get it off. But there are ways to take care of that. There really are. And one of the ways, where are my little brushes? What did I do with them?
Right here.
Ah! Yes. Good. I bought these red-handled brushes. They have a very, very, very hard, I mean, they'll tear your paper up, basically, is what you're going to do when you start using these. And I will tell you that I used them on this painting. I did rough up the surface of the painting, but that's right at the last. Once you have your colors down, then you start working on the edges. And here, you can see where I worked on the edges around here. This is where I still haven't worked on this or this, but you can see how I wet the paper, and then I just back and forth a little bit, and the color lifts up a little bit, and then it starts blending, and it starts softening that edge. Now, some of the edges you don't want to have soften. This needs to stay sharp. This needs to stay sharp. This one, all of these are sharp. So it's tricky, but here, this is a softened part of the paper, and it makes it look like that leaf is just bending, and of course the dahlia is all twisty and turny anyway. And so you can see the part that has been softened and the part that is still really kind of harsh. Okay? This is what I thought was the finished painting. All of the things have been softened. Everything to me was done. But I didn't know what to do with the background. And I kind of liked this effect. I thought, well, I'll just do a taupe background, because I really, once again, didn't know about this thing. I have always been able to, and some of you I'm sure do this too. When you just before you go to sleep, you think about, what am I going to do with the background? And I started worrying about it, and about 2:30 in the morning, bing, I woke up, and my brain just said, phthalo blue. If you know that color, it is an intense color. It's absolutely a gorgeous color. So I took my Duro film, you know, that plastic film, at 2:30 in the morning, went out, put it down on this painting, painted some blue around it, and it was the answer. Yes?
But you cut, right? I mean, you don't just plop that down on there. You've got to cut
Yeah,
all around
cut
these
around.
edges, right?
It's just a piece of plastic. And it was a piece of plastic, I put it down, I painted this blue around it, and it really set it up.
Okay, so you painted on top of the plastic.
I painted
to
on
do
top of the
that.
plastic, yes,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay.
And that was that Duro.
Okay, so that's not the frisket that
No,
you're
it's not the
doing.
frisket.
Okay.
Good, I'm glad you, because that might have been. So the next morning, I started on the background, and this is the finished picture. It's been quite a hit. People really like it. The original's gone and the prints are selling, and one thing that I did is got out my color wheel. And I thought, why are these colors so amazing? And so, I don't know if y'all can see this triangle. It is an equilateral triangle, equal sides, and it's pointing to, yes, the purple. It is also pointing to, yes, the blue. And it's pointing to a golden yellow. This is called a triad. And I was like, I've heard of those. I've heard of triads. So now, and so I named it Dahlia Triad, because I was just so stunned that that's what this is for. Well, I showed my daughters, and of course they immediately, I want one. And I started on another one. And this one is going to have the, what is it called? Complementary, split complementary colors. So it's going to be a darker, this will have a deep bluish purple. But yeah, I had to put a little yellow in there. But that's what this one's going to be. And you can, oh, and by the way, you see this blue tape? I don't use this anymore. I don't know if y'all have a real special way of holding your pictures onto a board like this, but this blue tape doesn't work because I use a tremendous amount of water and my paper ripples. I use what's called bull clips now. Now I couldn't use them on here because this, of course I bought this board and it's too big for the bull clips. So I have another board that's not as thick. But these, once you put it on the paper, if it starts to ripple, you just open it up a little bit, pull the paper real hard, and it gets some of that ripple out. Yes?
Did I miss it, or did you say what paper you used? You
Oh,
said you
no, I
used
never
to
did,
use-
did I? Started off and never finished. Thank you. I now use, I use a lot of, the weights I use, this is, I think, 140. I use a lot of 300 now, 300-pound paper. It really takes a lot of water. It takes a lot of abuse. And the surface that I use now is called rough. And it's hard to get the, it's hard to get these kind of details with rough paper, but this is rough paper. So it can be done. If you have a really good brush that has a real sharp tip to it, which I've told you what my choice is, I'm sure you have yours. But yes, you can get this kind of detail with it.
And what brand are you using
Help me.
now?
somebody.
Fabriano or?
Fabriano, thank you. See, I knew you knew. It's Fabriano rough,
Yes.
and this is 300 pound. And at some point, if I ever do commissions, I will always do them on 300 pound. Makes a difference. You know, when you hand a piece of paper to somebody and they can hold it and it's out and it's flat, it makes a difference. So, it's very thick.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never thought of that.
And it's forgiving. I love the rough paper. But I didn't know about 300-pound paper when I did this or that. Okay, next. Oh, this is a fun thing. Granulating colors. Granulating colors are colors that have a mixture of different, you can see what's in this one. There's some kind of green, and then there's a turquoisey color. And this was just an experiment, just give it a try. I put a lot of water in this particular color, it's called Cascade Green. It's a beautiful color. But if you take a pretty good amount of the Cascade Green, put a lot of water on it, it separates into its principal colors. And then what I did is I did his vest with the separated colors. Because somebody, in their wisdom, had already figured out that these colors were beautiful together. I mean, I don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've already figured out that this turquoise and this green works beautifully together. So, this is what I did. And this blue is a different blue. I wanted his shirt to be very white and totally a different part of what he wore. And this is a professional bull rider, and I did take the picture myself. It's at a rodeo that's been going on since 1917, I think. And yeah, they stopped for World War II, but they picked it up again. Okay, and here's the finished painting. Had a lot of fun with this, but you can see how I used all of that blue and that green, and it just worked really, really remarkably well. I did put some here, and I think I put some down in his neck so that you have it in a few places. But I was really tickled with this painting. That was a fun one. Okay. Here's another one. This one's called Moonglow. People love Moonglow, but they try to keep it mixed up. And I knew it was granulating, so I tried it, and it has a really dark purple, and then it has a reddish purple. It almost has like 3 different colors. And so I used the mid-tone, watered down a great deal, and that's my sky. So this whole sky up here is Moonglow. And then the darker colors were here on the castle, and then the bluish colors were the shadows. So that's the buildings. There are buildings all across here, and I painted over them. But you can see a couple of them. That's supposed to be the Parliament building, but I turned it into a castle. But it still has the British flag. That's in St. James Park in London. That was a gift from my husband, our 25th wedding anniversary. So this is the building, and you can see I started putting frisket in. And this probably is where I stopped for about 6 months, and then I started again. Now you see how I just started, it just made me so nervous. I used one of those sea sponges, and I said, okay, I'm supposed to be able to use sea sponges and make leaves, and so I did, and I made these leaves, and but it started working. What I wanted to do was this garden part that I just wanted it to be just lush. So I would take different colors and put some of these light colors, and then I would put frisket on them. And then I would paint over them. And here you see on the bushes, there are some little dots. Let's see if I have any more. Did I put another picture? Yes. The grasses were, these probably have about 8 or 9 coats of frisket on it. I started with the very, very pale, put grass on it, and I did it with another fun little tool to buy. Has a little rubber tip, and you just put it down in there, and it barely has any frisket on it, but you can make little bitty lines. It's wonderful. And then after I put frisket on it, then I put the next color, mid-tone green. That's what the book said. So I put my mid-tone greens, and then I put more frisket on it, and then the book said use this, and I just kept doing it, and it turned into all of these grasses that really worked out really well. And I did the same thing with the flowers. I put down some flowers, put frisket on it, and then yes, and then you see the different bushes. These really were fun, because when I put this real dark on it, it was fun to do. The fence was not fun to do. The fence was not fun. The last part that really had me afraid was the lamps. So I started with the smallest lamp, and then I went to this lamp, and by the time I got to this lamp, it was just so much fun. But yeah. Now one thing that I'm willing to do, that a lot of people sometimes they either skip over it or they, oh, that's close enough kind of thing. I'm willing to paint exactly what I see in a picture if I like that part of the picture. So if I like this lamp, I am willing to put glazed glass on this side, and then this. And I'm willing to work on this. And I keep using the word willing because a lot of people just say, oh, I'm just going to blend this all out. Well, maybe that is what you want to do with your paintings. I am a realistic painter. That's not as realistic as I would nowadays, but the fence and the lamp are fairly realistic. So this is the finished piece. This is my husband. He's taller. Okay. All right, now's the fun part. This painting is in this gallery, and it's over against the wall, and it's a little boy that's holding the dog. And I just love the picture. And this is where I used my plastic coating, and you can see the shine. I covered the bottom part of the picture with this plastic paper. And then I decided what I was going to work on first. And the first thing I worked on were the boots. Once again, the dark lines I followed with my X-Acto knife. Talk about tricky. But you cut out around where the dark lines are, and you pull that piece of plastic off, and everything else is shielded except for what you're working on. And I cannot tell you how reassuring that is. I don't know how many of you have ways to shield your paper, but I can't shield my paper from myself because I get my hands in it, and I'll move my brush over the paper and something will drop, and it just, so
Where do you cut? Do you cut on the paper?
I cut the plastic.
No, I mean, is it on paper that you're gonna
It
paint
is,
on?
it is on the paper.
You
And
don't
it
cut-
does it
It
first.
is on the paper,
So
and
there's
then I
lots-
cut it, and I check a lot
Must
to be
tricky.
sure that I'm not cutting down into the
If
paper.
you cut the paper, is it ruined?
No, not at all, not at all. I have been known to cut the paper,
Okay.
but it's really not that apparent.
Okay.
In fact, I purposely cut paper sometimes. I did a picture of my sister who was lying on a sofa, and one of her cats was on top of her. And the last thing I did to the painting before I had it framed was I cut out the tips of the cat's claws, because the cat was laying on top of her, you know, doing that kneading process. And the story behind it is my sister had a solid year of chemo and radiation at the same time. She survived, but it was brutal to her body, and she slept for like 18 hours a day. And I am telling you, I couldn't understand how you could be that tired until I too went through something fairly similar. And that's how that painting started. But I looked at the cat, and it was just so meaningful, because that cat would push her other 6 cats away and sit on top of her for hours. And usually the cat would disappear if someone else was in the room, but that cat would not leave her side. And I can't talk about it anymore. Okay, now you see I'm working on this boot, and all of this other is shielded. Oh, and see that right there? This boot was perfectly painted, and I needed a shine on it. And it looked like a shine. At least I think it looks like a shine. Y'all can tell me later. But there, that kind of looks like a shine. So,
Yep.
and one of the reasons that I did this painting, besides the fact that I just fell in love with it, is the pants are checked. And I wanted to try something that was checked. And I guess that's on that list now where you go, I've done it, and I'm not real sure I ever want to do that again. But it worked out real well. Now what you see here are watercolor pencils. And these are the pencils I used to draw those lines. I put them later on, as I was doing details on the pants, doing the shading and all of that. I had my pencils stuck here, and I would take my paintbrush, wet it, get a little color from the tip of the pencil, whichever one I wanted, and I would paint just a little bit. And those checks would melt just a little bit. You could still see them, but I had a shade. I had shading. So it was a little tricky, but it was a fun experience. I had a good time with it. And here, you see the dog is blue. And I'm taking this is where I had tracing paper. I used the tracing paper and put down, then I took, let's see, all right, let me organize my thoughts. I put the tracing paper down on the dog. I drew around the dog on the tracing paper. Then when I cut it out, I cut inside the line just a little bit, about, I don't know, quarter of an inch maybe. Cut it out, laid it down on the dog, took my tape, see-through tape, put it all the way around the dog. Once again, X-Acto knife. Cut around it again, lifted up that tape, and that dog was perfectly shielded again because I had to do the background. To me, if I'm going to start a painting, I start on the hardest part first. And anybody who does portraits or animals, you've got to do the eyes first. If the eyes fall through, or if the face falls through, it doesn't matter how nice your background is. So I do the hardest part first, and to me that was the boots and the pants. I mean, the hair and all that stuff was not hard. The hands, it was this whole part of him. So he was shielded. I used the blue, and then and you see the finished painting. This is name, number, my email address. I would love to continue teaching you this. I would even meet you someplace and actually show you, sit down with you and show you how this is done. I promise you I would do that. I'm a huge proponent of these particular techniques of shielding paper. If you like white and dark. And if you're like me and you put your hand in your paint and then you get it on your paper. But I don't even know what time it is.
It is time, but that was so interesting. I could tell everyone's really enamored, so we could probably do about 5 minutes of questions if anybody has some
Anybody have any questions?
burning questions.
Yes.
I was gonna go back to the dahlia, and when you said this needed to be sharp, or that one needed to be soft, I was trying to
Oh.
say, what, I mean,
The
it needed it just because that's how you remember the flower? I'm just
This-
trying to get in your brain here.
Okay, it would be easier if I showed you on this. This edge needs to be sharp. This interior part of the petal needs to be soft. So all the edges, this edge, this outside edge of this petal will stay white, and I will not use the scrubber on it. But this edge, I will use the scrubber.
So make it realistic, in other words, for the effect that it should have. That's what it needed.
I'm sorry.
That's why I needed it, to make it the effect.
See where I left it
That's
sharp
what I understand.
and where I left it sharp? So, you may wanna come up and look at this and I'll talk to you in a few minutes. But this painting ultimately will have a lot more of the blue, dark blue violet that will come through here. It'll come through, and especially in the corners, and it will almost totally block out these petals. And then the background, I'll use the different colors up against it. It'll be cute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, everybody, let's give Bobbie a big round of applause.
If you have any other questions, or take my name and email down. There we go. And also, if you have questions about, I know almost all of these artists. I'm the chair of this show. And so if you want to know about some of these artists, I can perhaps tell you about some. Good?
Do you teach anywhere?
I don't, and I've been approached about
Being a
that.
teacher.
I don't. I haven't. I don't want to say I will be here every week at 2 o'clock. But I will take anyone into my home or meet you somewhere and teach you anything you want to know.
That's very generous.
You're the
Yeah,
most
no, I
generous
will.
artist
It will-
that I know.
Huh?
You're the most generous artist that I know.
Well, I want to share. I mean, that's what I've been doing. Huh?
Thank you so much.
in my packet.